She would have wanted it this way, my mother said softly, reaching across the table to pour champagne into my sister Chloe's glass. I stared at the three-tiered wedding cake in front of us, stunned, frozen, like I hadn't heard her right. They had done it. They really spent my inheritance, the one my grandmother left specifically to me, on Chloe's wedding. The dress, the venue, the custom calligraphy invitations, the honeymoon in Greece. All of it. Paid for with money that wasn't theirs. Paid for with the money my grandmother had set aside just for me. And they didn't even tell me. I only found out because Chloe, as always, couldn't help but gloat. "Oh, by the way," she said, twirling a strand of her golden hair like some soap opera villain. "Thanks for the honeymoon. You basically bought me Santorini." Everyone at the table laughed. I didn't. "What are you talking about?" I asked, already fearing the answer. "The money Grandma left," she said. "Mom and Dad said you weren't really using it for anything meaningful, so they decided to put it where it'd actually matter. You know, a milestone. A family event." I looked at my parents. My father just raised his glass. My mother nodded, as if I'd asked whether she wanted salt on her fries. My throat dried up. That money was in Grandma's will. For me. "It was left to the family," my mother said smoothly. "It was just in your name for simplicity. You're still young. You'll have time to make your own money." I didn't hear the rest. I stood up. Quietly. Deliberately. And walked out of that dinner without another word. My name is Olivia, I'm 27 years old, and I've always been the girl who didn't make waves. The quiet one. The reliable one. The one who helped clean up after parties, watered the plants when Mom forgot, and made excuses for Dad when he drank too much and snapped at people. And I was also the one who my grandmother saw through all of that. Grandma Helen wasn't loud or confrontational, but she had a quiet clarity that made you feel like you could exhale around her. Like you didn't have to perform. She used to tell me, "Invisible people build the world, Olivia. But they shouldn't have to stay invisible forever." She knew I got overlooked. She knew how everything in our family revolved around Chloe, the golden child, the performer, the princess. And maybe that's why, when Grandma died 2 years ago, she left something behind just for me. She'd quietly set aside a savings bond account in my name. My mother told me about it after the funeral, brushing it off, just a little something Helen put away. She wanted you to have it. For your future. It wasn't a little something. It was almost $50,000. I hadn't touched a cent. I kept it in a high-interest account, telling myself I'd use it to finally move out of my parents' house, or go back to school, or maybe start my own graphic design studio. Something that would let me stop being so useful to everyone else and start being something for myself. Apparently, my parents had other plans. When I stormed out of that dinner, I drove around for almost 2 hours that I just kept replaying those words in my head. You weren't really using it for anything meaningful. As if my dreams didn't count. As if their perfect daughter's wedding was more important than my independence. As if Grandma Helen's last gift to me, her final, quiet act of love, was nothing more than a budget line for Chloe's Pinterest-perfect ceremony. That night, I did 3 things. I opened Grandma's will. I had a scanned copy she'd emailed me when she was alive, "Just in case your mother forgets to give it to you," she'd said with a wink. I checked the account. It had been cleaned out down to the cent. 4 separate transfers over 6 months, all authorized by my parents. Apparently, my name alone wasn't enough to protect it. They had joint power of attorney from years ago, back when I was 18, and had never removed themselves. Just for emergencies, they said at the time. I packed a bag. Essentials only. My laptop, my passport, a few clothes, and the one photo I had of Grandma and me on her porch, drinking tea. Then I left. No note. No calls. No forwarding address. And I turned off my phone. They didn't realize what I did for them, yet. But they would. Because I wasn't just walking away. I was done playing the quiet one. And I was going to make damn sure they never forgot who they stole from. The first thing I noticed when I turned my phone back on a week later was how few people had actually noticed I was gone. A couple of unread messages from coworkers, mostly about shift swaps. One from my aunt asking if I was coming to the wedding rehearsal. Nothing from my parents. Nothing from Chloe. It told me everything I needed to know. In their world, I was a background character. The reliable extra who held the camera at family events, who volunteered to pick up last-minute groceries for parties, who took up as little space as possible. And now that I was gone, the show went on. But that was fine. Because this time, I wasn't coming back to play the quiet one. I was coming back with a plan. I spent 2 weeks staying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me what I needed: quiet, distance, and time. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to unlearn all the ways I'd been conditioned to tolerate being second place in my own life. And during those nights, I started reading. I dug into estate law. Trust accounts. Power of attorney abuse. I pulled out the copy of Grandma Helen's will she'd sent me and highlighted every line. It was clear, the money was mine. Not my family's. Not ours. Mine. And then I started calling lawyers. It took some digging to find someone who took me seriously. Most of them brushed me off with legalese or soft, patronizing tones. It's a family matter, or, are you sure you want to take legal action against your parents? But eventually, I found Maya Lynn. She wasn't warm, but she was sharp as hell. A probate attorney with a reputation for handling delicate inheritance disputes, code for exactly what I was dealing with. You have the original will? She asked during our first call. Yes. And documentation of the account being emptied. The bank statements are in my name. Her voice was cool, measured. They used power of attorney to access the funds. Correct. Without informing me. And used them to pay for my sister's wedding. She paused. That's not just unethical. That's potentially criminal. Those words sparked something in me. I wasn't just overreacting. I wasn't being petty. I wasn't being dramatic. What they did was wrong. And it had consequences. Maya agreed to take the case. The next few weeks blurred together. I sent her everything I had, the will, bank records, screenshots of messages, even Chloe's smug text thanking me for funding her honeymoon. Every piece was another nail in the coffin of the "it was just a misunderstanding" excuse I knew my parents would try to pull. And through it all, I stayed invisible. Let them wonder where I'd gone. Let them sweat a little. Because the real show was just beginning. Meanwhile, Chloe's wedding unfolded like some kind of social media fever dream. Even from a distance, I couldn't avoid it completely. Her Instagram feed was a constant stream of filtered perfection, champagne flutes clinking against golden sunlight, her standing on the steps of some ridiculous estate in a $6,000 dress, captioned, "A dream made real, ring sparkles #blessed. Blessed, huh? She didn't even post a single thank you to Grandma Helen. Not one. I found out through a friend that they hadn't even put up a photo of her at the reception. The woman who raised us, who practically babysat Chloe through her first 10 years, was reduced to a footnote. A name on a check. And that's when I decided I'd go back, not to reconcile, not to forgive, but to deliver the first blow myself. I showed up at the post-wedding brunch wearing the simplest outfit I owned. No makeup, no smile, no fake congrats energy. Just clean jeans, a blazer, and the will in a neat manila folder under my arm. Chloe blinked when she saw me. Oh. You're alive. Surprise, I said flatly. My parents looked up from their mimosas. My mother's smile twitched at the corners, not sure which version of me she was dealing with. I walked to the head of the table and laid the envelope down. What's that? Dad asked. That, I said, is a formal legal notice. You'll be hearing from my attorney within the week. What you did was fraud. My mom gasped. Olivia, don't be ridiculous. No, I said sharply. What's ridiculous is stealing from your own daughter because the other one wanted fireworks at her reception. Chloe rolled her eyes. You're seriously doing this now? You've always been so bitter. I'm not bitter, I said. I'm done. There's a difference. The room fell into stunned silence. My father started to speak, but I held up a hand. I have proof. The will, the account details, everything. You used power of attorney to funnel money that didn't belong to you into a wedding I wasn't even invited to help plan. You'll either return what you can or face charges. Your choice. I turned and walked away. My legs were shaking, but I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, they weren't looking through me. They were watching me walk out, and realizing just how badly they'd underestimated me. It's funny how people only start asking questions once you're gone long enough that they can't keep pretending it doesn't bother them. The first 2 weeks after I dropped the legal papers at brunch, I heard nothing. Radio silence. Not a single call, not a knock at my door. Chloe blocked me on everything. My mother sent one vague text, "Let's not escalate this. We're family." I left it on read. And then, the silence cracked. It started with a voicemail from my father, his voice thin, uncertain. "Olivia, listen, I think we need to talk. Maybe it wasn't fair what happened, but going to a lawyer. That's a little much. Let's sort this out like adults." That made me laugh out loud. As if they had ever treated me like an adult. Like someone whose voice mattered. Like someone they had taken seriously, until now. I didn't respond. Meanwhile, the attorney they so confidently ignored was filing the official complaint. Maya worked quickly. She filed paperwork proving misuse of the power of attorney, and within days, a court date was set for a formal hearing to contest the withdrawal of the inheritance. The judge ordered a financial review and temporarily froze a joint account in my father's name, one I knew still held some of Grandma Helen's redirected funds. That's when the panic started. I got a call from Aunt Julie. "What's going on, Olivia? Your parents said you're trying to bankrupt them." I sighed. "Did they also tell you they stole 50 grand from me and spent it on a wedding I wasn't even involved in?" There was silence on the line. Then a quiet, "They said it was a family misunderstanding." Then they're lying. I hung up. By the third week, the cracks turned into full fractures. My mom tried to show up at my apartment. I didn't answer the door. She stood outside for 20 minutes, knocking and saying things like, "We're just trying to keep the family together," and, "Your grandmother wouldn't have wanted this." Except she would have. Grandma Helen had always been the only one who saw me clearly, who knew how often I shrank myself to avoid setting off other people's egos. She was the only one who told me I deserved more. This wasn't about money. It was about respect. It was about the years they treated me like the shadow in someone else's spotlight. Now they were finally seeing what life looked like without their shadow there to clean up after them. Then came Chloe. I didn't expect her to show up in person. But she did. She knocked hard, entitled, impatient. When I opened the door a crack, she was already mid-sentence. "I can't believe you're dragging this out. You're ruining everything. My marriage is under stress now because of this." I leaned against the frame. "That's not my problem." She blinked. "Excuse me. You got a dream wedding. You got everything handed to you, like always. You think I care if your marriage can't survive the weight of your lies? Her face flushed. This is just like you, making everything about you when it was supposed to be my moment. I opened the door wider, just enough to let her feel the shift. It's never been about you, Chloe. It's been about the fact that our parents chose you every single time, and I let them. I let them walk over me for years because I didn't want to be the bad daughter. But not anymore. She scoffed. So what, you think suing them makes you a hero? No, I said calmly. It makes me free. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. The old Olivia would have folded. Would have apologized. Would have said, it's not a big deal. But that Olivia was gone. Chloe stormed off without another word. I closed the door behind her and locked it. Not out of fear, out of finality. After that, everything went quiet again. I didn't show up for family dinners. I didn't answer calls. I changed my number. I switched to remote work and started renting a studio apartment 2 towns over under a different name. I deleted my old socials, started fresh. No shared memories. No photos tagged with family. No digital strings leading back. I let myself vanish from their narrative. And slowly, I watched them start to unravel. They didn't know how much I used to do for them. I managed appointments. Picked up prescriptions. Balanced spreadsheets for my dad's freelance work. Helped mom with online orders because she couldn't figure out how PayPal worked. Paid the electric bill more than once when things got tight. They never noticed when I gave. But now, in my absence, they noticed everything. A distant cousin texted me out of nowhere, "Are you okay? Your parents said you're having a breakdown." I texted back, "No breakdown. Just boundaries." And then, 2 months later, the court date arrived. I walked into that hearing in a blazer Grandma Helen once gave me, holding a binder full of proof, next to Maya, who walked like she was born for the courtroom. My parents sat across the aisle, stiff and pale. Chloe wasn't there. They didn't say a word to me. They couldn't even meet my eyes. The judge read through the will, through the transfers, through the evidence of misuse. My mother kept wringing her hands. My father clenched his jaw like he was holding back an outburst. The hearing lasted 25 minutes. Judgment was swift. They were ordered to repay what funds remained, roughly $18,000. The rest, Maya warned, would be pursued through a civil suit if necessary. Their account remained frozen until repayment terms were met. And just like that, the money they'd stolen turned into a stone they had to carry. But the best part? It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the look on their faces as they realized. I wasn't their doormat. Not anymore. By the time the ruling hit them, I think they finally understood that I hadn't just changed, I'd evolved. The judgment wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a legal branding. The court had ruled in black and white that what they did wasn't just unfair, it was unlawful. And now it followed them like a stain. The frozen bank account was just the beginning. Maya filed a separate civil suit to recoup the remaining funds. Not just for the money that had been spent, but for damages, for emotional distress, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. I knew it would take months, maybe longer. But I was patient. Because for the first time, I wasn't the one paying the price for their decisions. They were. And it showed. I started getting messages from extended family. People who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted to get coffee, to catch up, to see how you're holding up. Translation: the story was spreading. My mother had apparently tried to do damage control, telling people I'd misunderstood the situation, that it was all a big mistake, that I was overreacting. But the court documents were public record. And Maya had been very deliberate in making sure they were worded clearly. She even sent a copy of the ruling to the lawyer who'd helped my parents access the inheritance account. Turns out, he'd advised them not to use the funds for Chloe's wedding, but they did it anyway. Even their enablers were backing away now. And that's when Chloe called me. Not to apologize. To negotiate. Her voice on the phone was cool, like we were business partners discussing logistics. Look, I know you're mad, but this is dragging everyone through the mud. If you drop the civil suit, I'll convince Mom and Dad to issue a public apology. I almost laughed. You mean the people who still haven't acknowledged that they stole from me? Who called this a misunderstanding even after a judge ruled against them? They're embarrassed, she said, like that was my concern. They should be. There was a pause. Then her voice shifted, sharper, more defensive. You're blowing this out of proportion. You're making the family look bad. No, Chloe. They did that all on their own. Click. A week later, Maya called with an update. They've submitted a settlement offer, she said. Full repayment of the $50,000, plus a written apology, contingent on you dropping the damages portion of the suit. I leaned back in my chair. They're scared. They should be, she replied. And frankly, the apology won't change much for the court. It's a PR move. But it's leverage. Up to you. I thought about it for a long time. An apology? What would that even mean coming from people who only acted when their bank account was at stake? But still, something in me said yes. Not because I needed it. But because they did. The letter came 2 days later. It was typed, formal, emotionless, but the signatures were real. My father's slanted cursive. My mother's neat block letters. We acknowledge that the decisions made regarding the use of the inheritance funds were inappropriate and violated the wishes of the deceased as outlined in her will. We deeply regret the hurt and damage caused to our daughter Olivia, and we accept responsibility for our actions. It wasn't warm. It wasn't personal. But it was admission. And that was enough. With the settlement finalized, Maya transferred the full restitution into my account. $50,000. The money that had been promised to me, stolen from me, and now, rightfully mine again. But by that point, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle. The moment. The transformation. Because with that money, I didn't run away. I built something. I used it to lease a small workspace in the city, something I'd dreamed about for years. A quiet, sunlit studio where I could finally launch my freelance design business. I bought equipment, registered a domain, created a brand. And I did it with my name. Not as Chloe's sister. Not as the quiet one. As Olivia Moore. And then I did something they never saw coming. I made a donation. Not anonymous. Not silent. I donated $5,000 in Grandma Helen's name to a local scholarship fund for girls in foster care, specifically for those pursuing creative careers. I sent the receipt to my mother. No note. Just the confirmation. A few hours later, she texted me. She would have been proud. I didn't reply. They say revenge is best served cold, but honestly, I didn't need revenge. What I got was something better. Respect. Autonomy. Peace. They'd taken what wasn't theirs because they thought I'd never fight back. Because I'd spent my whole life making myself smaller for their comfort. Because they thought kindness meant weakness. But this time, I was done shrinking. And when I walked into my studio every morning, I didn't think about what they did. I thought about who I'd become. It still catches me off guard sometimes, how quiet my life has become. Not the heavy kind of quiet, the one filled with suppressed feelings and unsaid things. Not the kind I used to live in, where silence meant swallowing pain to keep peace. This new quiet is lighter. Still. Solid. It's the kind that comes when the noise is finally gone. When the people who talked over you, doubted you, dismissed you, are no longer at your table. My studio opened 4 months after the settlement. It's nothing extravagant, just 2 rooms, warm light, white walls, and a corkboard full of half-formed ideas. But it's mine. Fully, freely mine. I work with small businesses, local charities, and first-time entrepreneurs, people who believe in starting something with heart. Every invoice I send out has my name in the corner. Not hidden in fine print. Centered. Bold. Olivia Moore. It still feels surreal sometimes. To not just exist, but to own my space. My parents haven't reached out since the apology letter. Not directly. They sent a generic "Happy Birthday" text in April. I left it unread. Chloe's been quieter than I've ever known her to be. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she and her husband are working through things. Translation: the foundation wasn't as strong as the flowers and filters suggested. But I don't keep tabs. I don't need to. Letting go of them wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I spent too many years fighting for scraps of validation, clinging to the hope that one day they'd just see me. That one day, I'd do something loud or brilliant or impressive enough that they'd finally say, "There you are. We're proud." But that moment never came. Instead, I had to create something they couldn't ignore, and walk away anyway. Last week, I visited Grandma Helen's grave for the first time in over a year. The air was crisp. The grass still green, even this late into fall. I brought a single sunflower, her favorite, and tucked it beneath her name etched in granite. "I did it," I said softly. "They tried to erase me. But I kept my name." I stood there a long time. Not grieving. Not hurting. Just remembering. And finally, releasing. Because everything she saw in me, everything she quietly nurtured while the rest of them looked past me, I'd finally claimed it. Not through anger. Not through revenge. Through action. Through courage. Through a voice that no longer needed permission to be loud. A few days later, I got a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. I knew the handwriting. My father's. The envelope was thick, the pages folded neatly. "Olivia. You don't have to read this. But I hope you will." He didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't make excuses. What he wrote was messy. Honest. Flawed. He admitted that he'd always seen me as the quiet one, the one who didn't demand, didn't rebel, didn't need anything. And that somewhere along the line, they mistook my silence for strength they didn't have to support. "I thought letting Chloe shine meant keeping you in the background. I didn't realize I was dimming your light. You didn't just prove us wrong, you reminded me of who your grandmother was. I see her in you now. Maybe I always did. I just wasn't brave enough to say it." At the end, he wrote, "You may never want us back in your life. I wouldn't blame you. But if the door ever opens again, even an inch, I'll be here. Ready to meet the daughter I should have known better." I read it 3 times. Then set it down and stared out the window for a long while. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt sure. Sure that I didn't need their approval. Sure that healing could come, not through reconciliation, but through choosing yourself. Sure that my legacy wasn't built from their mistakes, but from my decision to rise beyond them. Now, every time I walk into my studio, I see a framed print above my desk. It's a quote Grandma once scribbled in her messy, looping handwriting. "The quiet ones don't stay quiet forever." And beneath it, a small brass plaque I had made. In honor of Helen Moore, who saw me before I saw myself. My life isn't perfect. But it's finally mine. And that's the kind of legacy that can't be stolen.